what are you doing every day that changes lives around you and being a good person and a good American? Like that's it to me. Like the Fox News, CNN, MSNBC life, like, bro, I got no interest in it.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We got a special guest today, Frank Luna. How's it going?
Doing all right, Dan. How about you, bro?
Living the dream, as we said before. Where you
said before?
Yeah. Where you at right now?
Jersey Shore, man. I live about an hour south of New York City, Bradley Beach, Asbury Park. Kind of born and raised in this neck of the woods. What about you, Dan?
We're in Austin. We're in Austin. Yeah, we're in a real state.
Don't get me started on that, buddy.
So you grew up in that area, Jersey Shore?
Yeah, grew up down the shore. You know, it's kind of it's like a lunch bucket, blue collar area until you get over the bridge. Really, in any beach town or usually, I think things that today wouldn't necessarily fly that flew back then. Led to some interesting feelings, and I know you talk about that stuff a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening to your podcast with the veteran with a sign the other day, and just those things about your parents that you probably wish they did a little differently, but they were doing the best they could with what they had. So nothing too crazy, nothing too great, but it's kept me going this long. So
sure, yeah, it's better than me raised a pussy, right?
Trust me, man. Absolutely. And there's a lot of lessons I learned, and I think there's a few things I'll say about that. One, seeing the tough things that were positive were great. Seeing my father go to work every day, busting his back, coming home covered in mud and oil and dirt, and wanting to sit down and eat, and all that stuff was really good. And then I think sometimes when you see the interpersonal relationship stuff that I try to do differently as an adult than he did. I think there's a lot of things to me that lessons in life that you're either trying to get closer to or further away from. And a lot of that came from my dad, I would say.
Sure, yeah. I mean,
a lot of both.
Go ahead.
A lot of both. There's a lot of things that my dad did I'd try to emulate, and there's a lot of stuff that if I did, I would be embarrassed to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, our parents were pretty ignorant, it seems like, and the next generation of parents, just based on the result of the kids we're seeing these days, have been mostly pussies. So it seems it seems like now we would be able to take the best of both of these and learn and improve. Like, you think we'd be able to improve on each one of them instead of what most people do, which seems to be just doubling down on one or the other, to be honest.
And that's probably even too cultural. I think that you could take that out of parenting. You probably can say the same thing about the schools. You could say the same thing about what's going on with our government and in our communities. And that's where I think I just try to stay hyper focused on what's going on around me, how I can impact people near me in a positive way, and it kind of helps cut through all the noise of the internet and the craziness that's going on. So,
what was high school like there?
It was fine. With big high school, probably 700-800 kids in my graduating class. I kind of was probably your average enough student. Got in trouble for the things I should have gotten in trouble for the most part, and it was a little rough. I like scraping a little bit, but I think that a lot of that was probably just kind of some of that insecurity as a kid, kind of that chip on my shoulder popping up repeatedly throughout my high school and early college years. And again, that's something that served me well in a lot of areas too. That chip on your shoulder that you want to get better and be better than the people in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a waning attitude these days. It doesn't. People used to, and I think probably rightly so, complain about keeping up with the Joneses. We shouldn't necessarily base wins and losses in our own life, success or failure, on whether or not we're keeping up with somebody else. But there is something about societal norms and pressures that kind of serve as left and right limits so people don't go off doing retarded bullshit all the time, because we do have a proclivity to get tunnel vision and live in echo chambers and think we're the right ones and everybody else is wrong, when usually it's not really that cut and dry.
Yeah, and I think the point I'll say that as well, Dan. I think sometimes we also can look at other people, especially with the internet, and think, oh man, that person's life is great and they're doing all these big things and amazing things, and wow, they're really influencing a lot of people. And it's like, bro, they have like 50,000 followers, 28,000 are bots, 10,000 are some farm in India, and they have 2,000 people who really know what they're doing every day, and they're showing you a minute of their week. Everybody can be great for 5 minutes. It's what are you doing for the other 23 hours and 55 minutes?
Yeah, 100%. So speaking of that, what'd you do when you got out of high school?
So I was working. I went to college. I was a police dispatcher in high school or in college. I kind of thought I would go the law enforcement route, but I think once I got inside a police department, I was 18. And I saw the life that those guys were living. It wasn't easy, especially I was on a midnight shift. I was young and immature, and like here I'm getting, Dan, how old were you when you joined the military?
I was 24, so I'd gone to college twice before.
Oh wow! So those guys who kind of get in that role, whether it's law enforcement or first responder. I don't put them in the same bucket as the military, but that. I was 18, police dispatch. I'm like, man, like this is crazy. And I go through the few years of that, graduate college, had a political science degree. The only reason I was a political science major is because going into my junior year, my professor's like, look, man, you got to pick a major. And I'm like, I just want to do something that's going to get me out of here on time. And he's like, well, you've taken some political science classes, so you probably could get out of here on time if you're a political science major. So that was 01 through 05. So kind of after 9/11 in college, and what was going on in college campuses with guys like Michael Moore coming to speak, that really pushed me away from any of that left-leaning liberal thought when I saw the stuff those guys were spewing on campuses. So
yeah, well, that's only gotten worse, I think. But
it's terrible, dude. Yeah.
So political science. What do you think you learned out of that process?
How to show up on time a little bit. I don't think that what I learned in political science classes in college, I spent the past, 15 years after college, I was working in politics and government, anything from local, state Senate, gubernatorial, congressional, U.S. Senate stuff, mostly in New Jersey. I've been in the mix on a couple different presidential campaigns, never as like a paid employee per se, but as a regional guy helping out with different stuff. And what I learned in college didn't prepare me for any of that. I think I wasn't in college because I wanted to learn either. I was kind of in college because I thought that's what I wanted to do, to not end up being what my dad was, breaking my back every day. And so I had a chance to go to college. I did, worked a midnight shift to go through there. So I don't think that what I learned in college, Dan, really brought me much in terms of experience or knowledge as I kind of then got in the mix on political campaigns. I just really don't.
Yeah. I mean, I worked on a few back in the day, really just because I think it was – I've always been not too fond of authority, I guess you could say. That's putting it lightly, right? So I kind of wanted to see how the sausage was made. So I took some jobs as a body man and some other stuff, just to kind of see what it was like. And they're the worst.
You want to talk about that at all? Any of the guys you do the body guy stuff with?
One of them's a buddy of mine, so I won't talk about that. But I can tell you that everybody that works in politics is a piece of shit for the most part, right? There's one or two standouts that are actually good people here and there, but for the most part, the politicians are megalomaniac lunatics, and the people that work for them are just ladder climbing. They're social ladder climbers, right? So we had guys on staff who were our candidate was winning pretty handily, and people from the losing candidates on the same political side were like doing work for us while they were still getting paid by the other guy, right? Just so they could probably try to get a job with us because that other, and maybe that's just the nature of the beast, because it's transient employment, right? I mean, you don't, you're not, unless you're a chief of staff for somebody or a full-time staffer for a candidate who's entrenched, you don't know if you've got a job tomorrow. But I think that's the way we set it up on purpose is the beauty of politics, right? The fact that you have to do the right thing to keep your job. That was supposed to be the point. You know what I mean? Now,
man, we strayed from that, huh?
Yeah. Now that's not really how that goes. So, yeah, that's what I mostly learned from it is that people are pieces of shit that work in that industry.
Yeah, I like anything, I think, ran into some people who were there for the right reasons. I remember when I first started working in politics, my dad got this award, and it was him in a hard hat, and it was like this 16 by 20 picture of him. And I was working for the governor of the state of New Jersey at the time. And I went home to the house, and I'm like, my dad's looking at pictures of himself. And I'm like, Dad, what the hell is this picture? And he said, I want you to take it with you and hang it in your office so you always remember the working man. And I'm like, fair enough. Like, that's a really good thing. I appreciate you saying that. And he's like, I want you to remember one thing. You got into politics with nothing. You better leave it with nothing. And that was just his way of saying, like, you're not there to make yourself money. You're there to kind of help people and do that. So that was always tried to make that my guiding star in that world. But it was hard, man. You said it. There's a lot of people in that industry that care about the next line of their resume, a whole lot more than they care about helping a Korean war vet who's suffering with Agent Orange, so ran into a bunch of that. Sure.
Yeah. And then, so what was your experience like? Did you work in as a political staffer that much after your political science degree, or what was your actual real work experience?
Yeah.
Tell me about
No, I did that, Dan, for 15 years.
Wow.
Political campaigns and, in that, I was unemployed a bunch of times. You mentioned it, transient employment, so there would be different opportunities that would come up, and, you just kind of bounce around a little bit, which, was difficult enough, but I always made it work. I was fortunate that I didn't have too much, I call it kind of the things that tether you to the real world in terms of, family and children and a wife and all those things that, I think kind of make people, if they're in a tough spot, makes it a little bit more difficult for them. So I was just kind of bouncing around political campaigns, man. And in New Jersey, being a Republican was never easy. And that's why I think the folks that I ended up working for generally ended up being people who were doing it for the right reasons, because it was a tough state to be a Republican. So, I had a lot of really cool experiences working in politics. I worked for a Republican congressman during the first few years of the Trump administration. That was as interesting of a time as I'll ever experience in politics. I'm glad to not be doing it anymore. But that was a wild time. Those first few years of that Trump administration were being a political staffer. I mean, we were getting death threats left and right. I mean, we had people videotaping young female staffers in public. Like it was just crazy. I've never seen anything.
What do you think the difference? I mean, aside from what you just mentioned with intimidation and shit, what do you think the big difference was when Trump got into office, early 2017, January? So that's when it starts.
I think what the switch that flipped for us, number one, was the media. I was working for a Republican candidate who had won in a district that Barack Obama won twice. And that candidate won by double digits as a Republican member of Congress. Type of guy who was pro-life, who was also endorsed by the local building trades unions. And, where we are in a blue collar area, like that's not far off from what most families were, blue collar, and they, have a faith that guides them. So he won by 10 points in the first election. Then he won by 20 points. And then, the day Trump was sworn in, the media just instantly turned. I'm telling you, I don't know, I never saw anything like that. It went from like, wow, this guy that you're working for is literally doing the work to save Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst, with the KC-10 replacement, to, oh my God, Donald Trump tweeted this, and your argument with him was not, like, your response wasn't appropriate.
Sure, yeah.
Like, dude, okay.
Yeah, I mean, those people are the worst. They're just the worst kind of people. Like, it's human beings represent a number on a fucking fact sheet to them. That's it.
Literally. Yep. And, this, yes, and they will say and do anything for the most part to get the story that they in their mind want to write. I mean, Dan, I'm sure you've dealt with the media plenty in your life, and you get an email like, "Hey, really need comment on this. My deadline's in 2 hours." It's like, dude, like your story's already written. If you're coming to me for comment 2 hours before your deadline, like that, just the mechanics of that are insane to me.
Yeah, that's pretty much standard, right? I mean, they don't want to give you too much time to be able to form a sophisticated response to the piece they've been working on for 6 weeks. And to be honest, there's a lot of parallels in the administration of government as well, because that's pretty much how these quote-unquote bipartisan bills get presented to Congress. It's like there's 4,000 pages, you got 24 hours to read it. It's like, all right, cool, well, I'm not AI, so I can't do that. Like physically, I'm incapable of doing that. And there's only one reason to do it that way, and that's to sneak shit into the fucking bill, right?
Yeah, and I think that is part of it, I believe. And then I think the other part of it is, everything is a fire drill, and there's the lack of planning and the lack of foresight in all of it is just, it's amazing to me how our government runs that way. And I don't know if that's how it's always been, and like maybe just the internet and what we're seeing the sausage being made a little bit differently now than we ever have. But just like the inability to meet like simple deadlines and guidelines, and I think the basic lack of trust between everybody that's either involved in government and or paying attention to government right now. It's like, your neighbor, what your neighbor's Twitter feed looks like by like the car they're driving at this point in our culture.
Sure.
So it's a really interesting time to see all that stuff. I mean,
well,
really
what's it like in where you are now, politically speaking? I mean, do you see, because the U.S., not just the way that people talk about politics, but the way people live their lives is so disparate these days. Like if you walk around, I live in Austin, which is a relatively liberal city, and you don't see people wearing masks here. But if you go to Seattle, there's going to be a bunch of people wearing masks, right? Even driving in a car by themselves wearing that shit. Now, you can say that is or isn't a political statement. And look, if you want to wear a mask, do it. I'm going to make fun of you, but go ahead and live your life, right? Like I'm not in favor of making anybody do anything, but that's a political statement at this point, in my opinion.
I mean, it's so where I live again at the Jersey Shore is there's two like really big Republican counties along the shore, and I grew up in one and I live in the other now. So like the Trump will win this county by tens of thousands of votes in the next election. So it's a little, again, I keep coming back to like that like weird microcosm of like the blue collar fisherman who freaking loves Donald Trump because of how he talks, and then the finance guy that has a multi-million-dollar home on the ocean that loves Trump because he was making a whole lot more money under his administration than it is under the current one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird, man. It's weird how frankly, I kind of feel like we should have blind elections. You know what I mean? Like personality absent. You put your positions, qualifications, and performance, if you've served before, on a piece of paper, and I choose based on that. Because this identity politics, fucking hero worship bullshit that's going on is about the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. Bill Clinton originally ran for president for the second time ran for president 30 years ago, and he's still younger than either candidate that's running for president right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much you want to dive into that stuff. I mean, I just think that the people that right now, I think the idolatry in politics to me it's scary, number one, because it feels different than like you watch like what would happen with JFK, right? Like he was a wildly revered figure by a certain segment of the population, in large part because of his religion and his upbringing, but like I don't know that he had the idolatry that some of the current candidates are, we're seeing. It's really, you said it, like the hero stuff to me of like these politicians, and I don't get it. I really don't. Maybe it's just because I was up close and personal to it for so long. I think there's a certain part of you that can root for a candidate, believe in a candidate, while realizing like these are human beings who have made a lot of mistakes, and I probably wouldn't let either one of them babysit my girlfriend's children.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not very unlike people who listen to celebrities about politics. Like, I mean, and maybe nobody truly does. I don't know if that's true or not. I know that they all say the exact same shit, and it's all on one side of the political aisle. And I see a bunch of people reposting their stuff and or quoting like, "Oh, fucking Robert De Niro believes this." Like, all right, well, so why should you care? Robert De Niro has been rich for
Literally
50 years. He's been rich for 50 years, right? He has nothing in common with you, nor does he care if you live or die, right? But I mean, and the same goes for most politicians. They don't give a shit about you as an individual. They just care about getting elected again. I truly don't understand why anybody would value their opinion in any way, right? Pretending for a living doesn't make you qualified to tell me anything unless you're teaching me how to act. If you're going to teach me how to pretend, then I'll listen. Otherwise, shut the fuck up, right?
And that's why I think a lot of the tenets of what you guys talk about, like as being a good citizen, you know, and that's where I try to really dial into what's going on around me in the immediacy of where I live and where I am and what I'm doing every day. Like and I think that over my lifetime has been something I've always kind of focused on. Like even when I was in high school, I was a youth baseball umpire. Like I was a youth basketball coach, and I didn't have any kids in the league. I just knew how good it was for me to have an outlet in the community where, you know, it was a positive environment for an hour where, you know, I could go up and play some basketball with my friends and, you know, learn competition and fairness and, you know, equality, all those things. Like I learned it, you know, that's in a lot of ways, that's where I learned it was, you know, as a young athlete and trying to figure out my way in the world and competing. And so like, that's where I love the stuff that you talk about that just kind of, it's like, dude, yeah, like what are you doing every day that changes lives around you and being a good person and a good American? Like that's it to me. Like the Fox News, CNN, MSNBC life, like, bro, I got no interest in it. I don't care about what they're talking about. I don't care about the flavor of the day that they're trying to divide us on. It's like, dude, like go help somebody in your community get better. Sure. And you said it, like whether you're teaching someone to do that, like, and even that, like a lot of our teachers are faulty. And I don't mean teachers in terms of like the people in schools every day. I mean, the teachers, quote unquote, that we're focusing on and relying on to teach us and educate us, they're even faulty. So it's like, show me through action what you're doing. And that's when I'll determine how much validity I'm going to give you and the lessons you're trying to tell us.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, people are fallible. Yeah. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to fail. A principle will never fail you, right? The idea that you should put more into your country than you should take out of it, for example, that's an idea that spanned not just our political party system, but every political system throughout the entirety of human history.
Yep.
You know, it is, man, just like anything else in the world, you're going to get out of something what you put into it, right? From effort to the quality of stuff you put into it as well. And we're getting what we deserve right now, frankly. You know, and maybe that's harsh to say, but we're getting exactly what we deserve because you always get what you deserve in mass. Like in the aggregate, politically speaking, you always get what you deserve. If you're not smart enough to see the despot coming and stop him in his tracks, if you're not smart enough to take part in the political process to box out megalomaniac assholes, then you're going to get what you deserve. You know, maybe it's harsh, but that's just the way it is.
I don't think it's harsh. And I think if that is the mentality that a lot of more people had day in and day out, like you get what you deserve. And, you know, look, man, sometimes, you know, I'll take it to a broader, like, cultural thing. Like sometimes you just get a really bad break, man. And you know, you can't bounce back right. I think a buddy of mine who got a DUI when he was like 19 years old, he was like 2 blocks from his house. He blew like .01 over the legal limit. I will never say drinking and driving is okay. Like, I'm not saying that. But like that dude at 19, Dan, he just never bounced back from that. You know, then he was 10 grand in debt, lost his license, lost his job. And like to this day, I still see him around, like, and he's struggling to this day. And I think he can point back to that and be like, man, I wish I recovered from that a little differently. Because it threw off his whole life at 19. A dumb mistake like that just really threw him off. And he let it. You know, he spent 10 years commiserating over it.
Yeah.
So, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, it's not great. And it kind of demonstrates a lack of leadership that's going on in the country right now. Because there's there's always outlets for this kind of stuff.
Sure.
People make mistakes, and you know, you got to eat it. You got to eat the consequences of your mistake. But well, I don't think anybody really wants a scenario where we have a single elimination tournament in life. You know what I mean? Because everybody's gonna fucking die at that point. It's I guess the Hammurabi Code, an eye for an eye makes the whole world go blind. Some people have said that about the Code of Hammurabi, but so I'm not coining any new phrase here. I'm just saying nobody wants that bullshit, and we see it with all of these social justice movements. They all eventually, my friend Chris Williamson likes to call it the 360-degree firing squad, right? Because at some point, everybody's going to come in line with that fucking target at some point. If you set these impossible rules. And the reason it happens that way is because the rules are meant to hold people accountable, not to punish your enemies, right? And once you start using the rules to punish your enemies, then you come into target as well, right? It doesn't matter what you do. At some point, the other side's going to be in control, whether it's on the macro level or the micro level, and they're going to target you and retaliation. That's how we're going to see it pretty soon here, I think, because of the way things are going in our political system, and it's not going to be fun for anybody.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where I think, you know, again, I look to like leadership locally, leadership in the community, what people are doing every day. And I'll tell you, man, like today, every Wednesday, I try to have as a non-negotiable on my calendar. There's a local group called the Jersey Shore Dream Center, and they're a mobile food pantry that delivers food to every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to 7 different stops. You're talking area motels, boarding houses. There's a place called Soldier On around here that's veteran assisted living that is just doing amazing work day in and day out. So today I was doing that food truck for, you know, about an hour this afternoon, and there's one guy that is the maintenance guy at one of the area motels. Now there's some folks who are on assistance who live in these motels, and this guy, he's a veteran himself. He served years. Obviously, he's an older guy, and he served years ago. And every time I get there, like, you know, he knows I was in the military for 3 years, whatever, and we talk about just life and whatever. Like, we have that bond, right? Like that, hey, we both were in at one point in our lives. And today he brings me, he says, hey, boss, come check out what I did to my room. Now, this guy got some cabinets out of the garbage. And, you know, he's a maintenance guy. So, like, he built this little side kitchen in his tiny motel room, which is part of his payment for being the handy guy at this motel. And, Dan, the pride that guy had in showing me, hey, man, like, this is my space. This is so important to me. Like, there's guys who make $1 billion that probably don't have as much pride in what they have that guy had in his little hotel room at the Jersey Shore. And, you know, I think about people like that and, like, how many bad breaks that guy probably had in his life. And that guy is still like, hey, man, I want to show you what I did in my little spot that I live in every day.
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just a striking example of, like, accountability and responsibility that, you know, I thought was valuable to share.
Yeah, there's some kind of pride that's good.
Yep.
We're in Pride Month right now. I don't think painting your retarded flag on the floor and then whining when people drive over it is something to be proud of. You should feel very ashamed at how weak and pathetic you are if that's your course in life. But taking pride locally, you know, that it's kind of broken window theory on a grander scale, right? So the more you care about something, the more other people are going to care about it. That's really what it means at the end of the day.
Look, and what was great, like that dude, you know, the one thing in addition to that, like, he had written on his like he had a note to himself. You literally can't make it up. And it was like on a little marker thing, and it literally said like "stop smoking," like that. You know, like he literally had a note on his wall that said "stop smoking," and you know we talked about that for a little bit too. So you know, it's just everybody's got that journey, and I know you were talking about some of that stuff the other day. You know, trying to get people to live a little bit healthier lifestyle and quit smoking and all those things. So I thought that was a very intriguing thing for him to have written on the wall. And I was a smoker. Used to be a drinker. I'm not either anymore. But you know, I know you've talked about that journey as well. So that was interesting to me that like he's got that thing written on there and like still setting goals for himself and trying to figure out what he's doing every day.
Yeah. You mentioned being in the military. You joined at a pretty late age. What compelled you to do that?
Dan, I mean, I was that guy of like, man, I almost joined for so long in my life. And, you know, probably about like a little bit after 9/11, I was like, man, I should really join the military. And I had a cousin in at the time. And I remember the pride in him and watching him and just all those things. And, you know, I never did it. You know, and it was one of those things that ate at me for so long that guys like you were out fighting a war while I was driving around the Jersey Shore in my Jeep hanging out with girls. You know, and it ate at me, man. It was one of those things that my entire adult life was always in the back of my mind, like, bro, you got to join. You got to do something. Like, this has to be, you can't go your whole life without doing that and, you know, giving back to your country and in a way that, and so there it was, man. At 36 years old, I was kind of in a professional spot where I was like, dude, I didn't really know what I wanted to do next. And, you know, at my age, I didn't think going active duty was necessarily the route for me. So, you know, I started calling up some recruiters in the National Guard, and I was told I was too old. So I reached out to a buddy of mine who, you know, was a sitting assembly member, and he was a SEAL. And he's like, dude, I'll help get you in because there's an age waiver process. But I'm telling you right now, if you get in, like, you're going. Like, you're not quitting. You're not saying like, this isn't some vanity project. This is like, dude, if I will help you, I'll write letters, I'll make phone calls. But like, if you get in, you're going. And Dan, I mean, that dude, the next morning I had a call from a recruiter who's like, hey man, I don't know who you know, but I was told not to stop until I got you on a bus to Fort Benning. And, you know, there was like a 6-month process of like, you know, just trying to get in. And then I got a call one day that I was going.
And what was that like? What was it like doing basic training? How old are you, 36?
Yeah, I was 36 when I got there, Dan. I mean, dude, I get off the bus, I'm wearing a Jimmy Buffett t-shirt, and like, I was in pretty good shape, thank God. Like I've always kind of a lot of my adult life, like I've always been pretty squared away, you know, at least in my 30s. And this drill sergeant comes up to me and he's just screaming at me. He's like, "Are you lost? Are you, you know, expletive lost?" Like he's going off on me, like, "Are you lost?" And Dan, it was one of those moments. I'm like, dude, I don't know what to do right now. Like I had like a split second, and he's like looking at me like face to face, and I'm like, I just sounded off, dude. I'm like, "No, drill sergeant, just a little bit late." And I waited, bro. Like, I didn't know if I was just going to get chipped. Like, I had no idea what was about to happen. And the guy kind of like looked me dead in the face and like nodded, like as little as like a drill sergeant would ever nod at somebody who's new there. And dude walked away. And I'm like, okay.
Well, he was probably 10 years younger than you, to be honest.
He was. Dan, he was. I mean, absolutely. They all were, for the most part. They all were significantly younger. I mean, that was, and when I went and enlisted infantry as kind of like that homage of like, look, I could have gone the officer route. I didn't want to. You know, if I was going to do whatever I was doing in the military, I wanted it to be as, you know, authentic as it could be, you know, to try to pay a little bit of homage to guys like you who were doing the thing while, you know, I was driving around doing nothing. And I say doing nothing, but building my career and building a life here. And that's why I went and enlisted infantry, you know, and I got there as the E4 when I got there. And, you know, it probably when you were in, was it 14 weeks, your basic?
I think it was 16 weeks, OSIT.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So we did it. It had jumped to a 22-week OSIT, in the middle of my like trying to get in. You know, when I first got in, it was 14 or 16 weeks, whatever. And then the recruiter, one of the things he said to me, he's like, "Look, dude, I got bad news. Like, you got in, but this is no longer 14 or 16 weeks or whatever. It's now 22." And I'll never forget, dude, that guy's like, you know, look, man, like, I understand, like, throwing 2 months on top of this training isn't easy, and I know you got a life and a job and all those things. He's like, you know, you haven't signed any papers yet. And Dan, I'm telling you, bro, like, that, my buddy, like, who's left his family how many times over the past 15 years to go to some country that I can't even pronounce, was just ringing in my ear, man. Like, if you get in, you're going, you know. And I said, no, man. I said to the recruiter, I'm like, I'm in. Whatever paperwork I got to sign, let's do it. And you know, relatively unremarkable service. You know, 3 years in the Army National Guard. But you know, I feel that at least I did something that for years just like gnawed at me. You know, and even to this day, like, that's why I try to do whatever I can to help veterans. That was something I've always was passionate about. And, you know, I think now, again, with my limited, unremarkable service, you know, like, if you meet a guy who's in the military, like, you have a different engagement with him than, you know, maybe somebody that wasn't in. You know, so I've tried to kind of carry that on and do what I can to help guys out now. And, you know, just keep going.
What do you think you got out of the process?
You know, I think about that a lot. I think that going through the 22-week OSIT was it was a very difficult time in theory, but like, dude, you know, like, you're told what time to get up every day. You're told what to wear. You're told what you're doing. You're told when you're eating, where you're eating it. So like the difficulty, I think, for me was getting through, like, I had a woman at home, like, but I just kept checking myself back to, like, dude, you're at Fort Benning, Georgia. You'll get your phone on Saturday. There's guys your age who, number one, didn't make it back from, you know, the Middle East, but number two, who were in the Middle East and, you know, in combat every day for 12 months. And, you know, 2 weeks before they're supposed to leave, they're getting told, hey, man, you're getting extended by 3 months. And, like, so it kept me humble. It kept me, like, just – I got out of the process. It's a good question, Dan. It really is. I think that just that I did it, you know, and that like, it was a lesson to me that, like, those things that gnaw at you in life, like, you can get through it. And I'll tell you, like, because I went through at an older age with a lot of different life experiences, you know, you were 24, you went through, so you were definitely an older guy in your bay. I guarantee it, right? I mean,
oh yeah. I mean, pretty much everybody is somewhere between 17 and 19 years old. There, every now and again, you'll get a 21, 22-year-old who has just graduated with their undergraduate degree.
Yep.
But the thing, what the typical guy gets out of the process is they grow up a little bit. I mean, this might be the first time in their life they've been held accountable in the real way, right? Or had true left and right limits with true consequences attached to them. But that's not the case. If you go in, like, when I was 24, I graduated college twice. I was the student body president one time. It's like I was an adult. I was a real adult. I know 18 legally is an adult, but I was a fucking retard when I was 18 years old. I was as far away from an adult as I was when I was 14, to be honest. So it's quite a bit different when you go in at a later age.
Yeah, and that's like, you know, I learned the process of it all. I mean, I was one of the first 22-week OSITs. So, you know, I think once my drill sergeants realized that I was a 36-year-old guy, like, that became very interesting. And, like, you know, they made me the PG, whatever, it was a platoon guide or whatever the hell it was. Like, normally they would change that every week, you know, or like every other day there's a new PG. Bro, I was the PG for like the final 3 months. And, you know, it was like one night I remember I had like a late duty downstairs or whatever, fire watch, whatever the hell it was. And I was talking to one of the drill sergeants, you know, he took his hat off, like they will do it sometimes. And he's like, how you holding up? I'm like, drill sergeant, like, am I ever not going to be PG? And he laughed at me. He's like, dude, we talk about it all the time, but like, you're going to stay in there because we'd rather deal with you than some 22-year-old. You know, all right, I appreciate that, but like, let somebody else, because you have the responsibility. 60 guys, none of who want to listen to you. But I think the thing too that I got out of it, as I think about it, Dan, like the amount of like younger guys who would be like coming to you for, and again, I ask you about this experience as well. Like the younger guys who would come to you and like show you a letter from their girlfriend, like, and trying to be tough about it, like, bro, like my girlfriend's dating my cousin. And like it says it right in this letter, and they're like trying not to cry, and it's like, yo, man, like let's go in the bathroom real quick, let's talk this thing through, and like, man, I gotta quit and go home. And I'm like, dude, no, you don't. Like, and even the stupid stuff like fighting. Like I was a fighter, man. I loved scrapping, and Dan, I had this kid who's Nebraska kid, wrestler, like twice my size, and whatever reason, like he wanted to roll with me, and I'm like, I just said, I'm like, dude, you will whoop me. Like you're half my age, twice my size, and you're like, I could tell, like you will roll me. But like, what if you punch me and my head hits the wall and I die? And like for a split second, he's like, yeah, but I still want to fuck you up. That's fine, but don't. Like learn that like split second of a lesson of like, yeah, dude, like what if you break your hand and have to start this process all over again? So just that maturity, it was and look, man, I've gotten a few fights at basic training. I think everybody does.
Yeah. Well, we were lucky enough to have one of our junior drill instructors. I think he was relatively new. Drill Sargent he was one of the guys that helped start the combatives program down at Benning. So he showed up to day one with 2 black eyes because he had just fought in a tournament and shit. So we could fight all we wanted to as long as we did it in the middle of the bay, right?
Yep.
Like, and as long as somebody was there to supervise, they would let us fucking throw blows whenever we felt like it, which was really nice, right? Because I think you put whatever it is, 40, 50 dudes in a room together that don't know each other from shit, right? It's one thing if it's your squad or whatever, but these guys don't know each other, and it's all just a pissing match the whole time. Sometimes you got to get in there and fight a little bit. I mean, that's kind of how it is.
Yep.
So you were in the Jersey Guard?
Yeah.
How was that? Like once you got out of basic and shit, how was that?
It was honestly, I got there, it was COVID, so we really weren't doing too much. I think, and that seemed to be the case of a lot of units, even active duty. Like the tempo was different. The training, I think, was different. Kind of what you were doing as part of your service was different because of COVID. Like, and it was, again, I felt it was wildly unremarkable. The one interesting thing was I ended up at the Capitol a couple of days after January 6th. That was fascinating for me to see, as an E4 in the Army and National Guard in a building that I walked around literally with members of Congress at points in my life. That was just a fascinating experience. I was there for 2 weeks, a month, whatever. So again, outside of the DC trip, just your typical annual training stuff and weekends at the range. And, again, I didn't get as much out of my service as I think I wish I did. But again, joining at the age I joined, like when it was time for me to re-enlist, I'd kind of seen like, I didn't like what I had saw with the COVID stuff and them kind of removing some guys from formation who refused to get the vaccine. I didn't really dig that. I just didn't like, I didn't like the tempo of it. And I was just like, hey man, like I did my 3 years. I love and appreciate you guys. And actually my unit is on a deployment now that is technically a combat deployment. And, part of me wishes I was there because I would have loved to experience that and get that combat patch, but it's not what I was destined for, I guess.
And what are you doing now since you gotten out? I guess you were probably you were working, I would imagine, when you got out. So what were you doing?
Yeah, I have a day job in public affairs for a utility company. So, I deal with a lot of different community organizations, and I've been able to kind of marry the political stuff to the community stuff, whether it's dealing with politicians about, in my opinion, like real things, substantial storms where, there are emergency management situations with, 75,000 people out of power, trees down everywhere. So being in the mix on that stuff. and still staying really active in the community. That comes down to, again, a lot of those principles that I know you talk about. It's like, what am I doing every day to make the people around me better, and how am I staying in the mix on that stuff? And a lot of wellness. I'm not like a wellness guy, but like, I try to do what I can to help people who might want to go on that journey a little bit. I quit drinking myself. I quit smoking myself. Anytime I could talk with somebody about that kind of stuff in a meaningful way that's not preachy, like that guy that I saw today, the guy Henry that had that sign. I'm like, dude, I quit cold turkey years ago. I've heard you talk about it. It wasn't that easy, but I did it. And, so I got a great day job. I got a woman who's got 2 children. That's something I never anticipated in my life, Dan, ever. Kind of trying to step into that step parent role, incredibly new for me. I've been doing it for about 4 years now. The kids are 8 and 10. So trying to be a good example for those kids, trying to keep them engaged in a positive environment where, they're learning and wanting to learn and grow. So, it's staying busy, man. I got a side hustle. I work with professional athletes on different types of marketing events. Sit on a couple boards. I'm on the Vietnam Veteran Memorial Foundation board. That's something we should talk about down the line, because those guys, man, telling their story is something so important. And those numbers are dwindling as well. So,
well, we just did the 80th anniversary of D-Day.
Yeah.
A lot of my buddies were over there jumping. Unfortunately, I have a real job, so I couldn't just take a week off to go, pretend it's fucking 80 years ago. But it looks like they had a fun time. But yeah, those numbers are dwindling. There have been movies about Vietnam, but the characteristics of those movies have almost entirely been negative, right? Like, there's quite a few positive stories from World War II that have been made over the years. There's bad ones too, right, about the Holocaust and shit. Yep. But there's good ones, or at least ones that are meant to engender patriotism and shit. I think the vast majority of television and films made about Vietnam are negative. To be honest, off the top of my head, I can't think of any that are positive. So I wonder if someone's not going to take up that mantle at some point while these dudes are still alive and tell some of the stories of bravery and not just the stories of how we shouldn't have been there. Like, yeah, we know we shouldn't have been there, but that doesn't mean the guys weren't doing their fucking jobs.
Bro, and dude, Dan, it's so awesome that you said it that way, because, like, I'm with a lot of Vietnam veterans at a lot of different events, and again, I'm on a board of trustees there to try to help them raise money, and it's so cool. I'll send you the video when we get it. They just had, because of that very reason, the New Jersey Vietnam Memorial Foundation just had commissioned like a 45-minute documentary of like what these guys went through. And man, it's awesome, Dan. The clips I've seen from it, they talk to so many Vietnam veterans, family members, Gold Star family members. It is like, dude, I'll send it to you, because it is exactly what you said, and it tells their story. They tell their story, which I think is just so awesome that they got that opportunity. I'm sure there's plenty of documentaries about Vietnam. This isn't new, but it's new to me, and I think it'll be new to a lot of guys our age to see kind of what they really went through and hear it from them decades after it. It's awesome. It really, they are some bad dudes, man.
I guess there's a couple. We Were Soldiers was a pretty good one.
Yes. Yep.
Rescue Dawn with Christian Bale is pretty good. Other than that, I'm looking down this list, and they're all like, if you click through these films, it mostly says anti-war biopic or whatever the fuck. Yep. Tropic Thunder was not real. Hamburger Hill's not bad either. I guess that's a pretty good one. Yeah. But like the vast majority, Apocalypse Now, Full Metal Jacket, Platoon, Casualties of War. Oh boy, Deer Hunter. They're all pretty rough. I mean, it's about fucked up shit that happened there, not necessarily good stuff. So, yeah, maybe. I mean, it would be nice to see something like that. There's quite a few. There were quite a few medals of honor from the Vietnam era.
Yep.
And And I'd like to see some of those stories told, like Benavides, for example. That's a pretty incredible story. This dude gets shot up and he's still carrying people out and laying waste to the enemy and shit like that. Quite a few. I can't remember the total number of, let's see, 235 medals of honor, it looks like, during Vietnam.
Wow.
That seems like quite a bit for Hollywood to fuck around with. Maybe they can figure it out at some point.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, that's good to do. I mean, look, we've had good and bad ones about the GWOT. Can't really complain about that.
Sure.
You know, it seems like a missed opportunity because those guys are still around to actually talk to.
Yep.
Maybe Tom Hanks will do another one after Band of Brothers in the Pacific about Vietnam, and I think that might be more than a 10-part series though, because there's a lot of stories to be told there.
Yeah, no, their stories, and I love the guys who dude, they still got their lapel pins, and I love seeing the CIB pins, and those guys are still as proud of that stuff now and as they were back in the day. But they'll say all the time, like we never got the welcome home. And that's one of the first things one of the guys told me. He's like, one of the best things you can do to a Vietnam veteran is not necessarily thank him for his service. It's just say, welcome home. And I have found, like, if I say that to a Vietnam guy, they are just so grateful, man. Like that those two words that they just didn't hear enough. I think, and you're a guy who's done some bad stuff yourself, man, and I bet there's a lot of nights, I would imagine, where you're wishing, man, I can't wait to get home and see the crowd and my family and people that I love and miss. And like, they didn't get that. So, it's really neat to see them kind of getting that now.
Yeah. And it's never too late, right? I mean, it was, the guys in the Pacific Theater, I think, were kind of overlooked for a long time as well.
Sure.
Because the story from the Pacific Theater wasn't, the airborne marching on Berlin and taking the Eagle's Nest. It was dropping 2 bombs on Japan. That was the real story, right? Like, we heard stories from some of the guys. What's his name? Basilone, I think.
I don't know.
John Basilone, yeah, from that was awarded a Medal of Honor. He came back and did a war bond tour afterwards. That's the real reason, because it was used for propaganda, basically, for fundraising. Yep. You know what I mean? But for the most part, I don't think the stories about the Pacific made it back in the same way that the stories about defeating Hitler did, because it was far away. It wasn't people that looked like us and shit. I don't know. I just think it was different. But they eventually got their due, so there's no reason we can't do something for this Vietnam crowd as well. So what else you got going on? What's coming up in the next year or 2 years? What do you got going on?
I don't know, Dan. I mean, I think just trying to do what I can to stay local and be in the mix in the community. And like, again, it just comes down to like helping my neighbors, man. I know it sounds so goofy, but like doing stuff like that food truck where, every freaking Wednesday, like it's a non-negotiable on my calendar. And even though I had this plan, like I met up with them and, I think just kind of trying to live every day, like in a way that's honorable, in a way that's like benefits people around me. I mean, I know it sounds like so goofy, but like, that's just it to me. Like I have obviously professional goals and I got a lot of this cool stuff going on with these professional athletes. That's been like a wild journey for me over the past couple of years that I never really saw coming. I think any way I can stay in the mix and make a difference. And, again, even if it's conversations with that guy, Henry, and, I know the guys down at Smokeless Vets are doing a lot of work, and, I really am intrigued by what they're doing. Their journey and what they're trying to do to kind of help people is awesome to me. It's something that it really caught my attention. I saw you talking about it not too long ago yourself, and I've seen some of the stuff that they're putting out. So, dude, just trying to stay humble, stay in the mix, and trying to help people. I mean, that's it for me. Like that's there were a lot of times as a young kid or even an adult before I kind of righted my own self and got in a direction that was positive for me, where it's like, man, I wanted that help. I wanted that I wanted to know things would be okay, and I needed a way to get there. So, look, man, I want to make money. I want to do cool stuff. And at the end of the day, like, I can't take any of that with me. So I'm just trying to make an impact.
Sure.
And that's, it's basic, it's as basic as it gets for me, like that. And for some people, that's outlandish thought, like, oh my God, this guy cares about helping people. And it's like, no, I really like it's, and if I got one thing out of the military, and it's that some veterans may feel a little bit more comfortable talking to me than they would have otherwise, I consider that a blessing. I really genuinely do.
Yeah, a big problem our folks have is they just don't know what's available to them. Yep. You know what I mean? That was a big problem for me when I got out too. So getting the word out there is pretty important. That smokeless vets thing is especially important. I mean, we're getting data back now after the bans on vape flavors, for example, right? The newest data shows that 18 to 20-year-olds are now like exponentially more likely just to smoke cigarettes again, which is going to give you cancer. And there's not one study on earth that shows that vaping is going to cause cancer. Not one. It doesn't exist. So it's fucking.
You used to be a smoker, right?
Yeah, when I was in the Army, because I was bored. You got to do something. Yeah. You know what I mean? Drink coffee. You can't get high all the time, so you got to drink coffee and smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, dude, that was the hardest part for me, man, was not smoking when I was in the military. Like, and when we would get, people would always find a way to get some stuff to the bays, and a lot of times it was chewing tobacco and vapes and all those things, and they'd be like, Luna, we're making a run. Like, what do you want? I'm like, bro, get me caffeine pills and Advil. That as they're putting together like their contraband list, like those would be my request, man. Just get me some caffeine and Advil, because I need it. My whole body needed it.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. It's. I think going in, I don't know. I was only 24, so I wasn't quite that old yet. But I'm sure you were getting signed up by the time you got to your unit for AARP and shit, right? I mean, that's kind of one of the jokes people like to play.
Yep. Dude, and it was the one drill sergeant used to call me Father Time. Another guy was calling me Brett Favre for a while. For a while. You ever see the movie Major League?
Oh yeah, come on.
Jake Taylor, the catcher,
Tom
that
Berenger,
they pull out of retirement. Yeah, bro. The one guy's like, "Are you fucking Jake Taylor? Like, what are you doing here?" I laughed, and like all the guys around me are looking at me like, "How did you just laugh?" I'm like that shit was funny, and because you've never seen that movie, you don't know how funny that is.
Yeah.
And like so I had a little bit of more leeway, I noticed, with some of the drills. I think just because if they would say something that was funny and that like only I understood, like I was allowed on occasion to laugh. It doesn't mean I get put on my face plenty of times, because I did. Anytime I got a little too comfortable, I was reminded I shouldn't be. But yeah, Jake Taylor. That was a great one when I was called Jake Taylor. That was like, all right, that's original.
I talked shit the whole time I was there. I mean, what are they gonna do? Like make me do more push-ups? Who fucking cares? I got nothing to do anyways.
Yep.
Anyways, so we got to get out of here soon. But if you had a message for younger people in the U.S. or people who are, I think, more common, kind of lost or politically homeless these days and don't really have a good sense of what's going on, what would your message for those people be?
It's twofold. One, it's a good day for a good day. And that's cheesy as hell, but it's something I've said in my that came out of darkness. Like I was in one of the darkest places in my life, and either somebody said that to me, I saw that somewhere, but I kind of like adopted that as a slogan. It's a good day for a good day. And all that really means to me is that like you've got so much more control over your 24 hours on this planet than you ever imagined. And, it's whether you can be in the mix on certain things, like get in it, don't be a bystander. Like, especially when it comes to your own journey. So many people I've seen it because I've been there. Like especially when I was wrapped up in drinking and partying and getting too crazy, like I was a bystander to my own existence on this planet. And there are so many avenues to not be a bystander to your 24 hours on this planet. And that's the one thing, like, make a difference. Like, it's that old cheesy starfish comment. Like, hey, I'm throwing all these starfish back in the ocean, but I'm missing 100 at a time. Well, and then you're asked, why are you trying to save those couple of starfish? And it's like, well, because that one starfish, that means everything. So you can't help everybody. You can't help everybody get through what they're going through. But you could probably help somebody. And a lot of times that has to start with helping yourself. So that personal accountability, that ownership of what you are and what you're trying to be. That's it for me, man. It's just like, that's just it. It's so simple. Like it's so simple for me to even say and think. And I don't even know how it's really ingrained in my head, but like, I go back to a conversation I had with a guy, and I'm like, man, I went through all this bad stuff as a kid. And he's like, dude, you went through that bad stuff as a kid and as an adult, so that one day you can help somebody else go through something similar. Dude, a guy told me that in a parking lot in Freehold, New Jersey. Damn, my life. That comment changed my life forever. Mm-hmm. It weaponized everything I'd gone through and put it in a positive light.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can turn your pain and suffering into empathy for other people, then you can save both of your lives. That's how it works.
Bro, and that, Dan, like, I appreciate the way you just said that. I heard you say that before, because that for me was like my eureka moment. I was like 30 years old when a guy said, I'm like, wow. And over the past 10 years, I cannot tell you how many times, and I probably don't even need to tell you because you've done it too, where it's like this guy will say something, even as simple as that guy talking about stopping smoking today. I'm like, dude, I used to be a smoker, 2 packs a day. Guess what? I quit. Haven't had a cigarette in 11 years. Like, okay. Like, the way you said it was a hell of a lot more eloquent and intelligent than I.
Well, I heard somebody say something recently about how can I turn my misfortune into a blessing for someone else? And that stuck with me. I think that's a good way to think about life. Because at the end of the day, it's not about you. If you spend your life focused on yourself, you're going to be a miserable piece of shit the whole time.
Yep. And you're going to make decisions that are so selfish and so guided on like, oh my God, is this great for me? And so many times I made a move where I didn't think it might be the best thing for me, but like it turned out to be like opening the greatest door on the planet. And it's like, wow, like, oh my God, like people go through a breakup and they're like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. And it's like, bro, she was cheating on you for 8 months. Like you're in a much better spot now. Trust me, and it's so. Yeah, man, turning that pain and misery into helping somebody else is like, that's it for me. Like, that is it.
That's the way it works if you're a decent human being, that it'll work for you. Tell everybody where they can find you. We got to get out of here, but tell everybody where they can find you on the interwebs.
I just got an Instagram. It's nothing special. Frank Luna NJ. If anybody wants to chop it up, talk about stuff. If you're an old guy who's thinking about joining the military, do it. I'll say that, man. I had a lot of guys hit me up after I went in, and they're like, dude, that's crazy. I want to do it. And actually 2 did. So I thought that was really cool. But, yeah, man, that's it. Just simple life, man. Just trying to stay in the mix.
Sweet, man. Well, thanks for coming today. I appreciate the conversation.
Appreciate you, dude. No doubt, brother.
Yeah, we'll see you around for sure. And thank you all for listening. This has been Citizen.